When my friend first showed me the dark web, I couldn't believe something so hidden even existed. It was like discovering a secret layer of the internet most people never even hear about. Yet somehow it contained some of the most illegal and disturbing things imaginable. Up until today, I had only used it for pretty harmless stuff, mostly reading about coding, browsing forums, and learning about minor shady tricks people talked about online. Nothing serious. But after the videos I discovered tonight, I'm pretty sure I'll never open the dark web again. I first met my best friend Alex shortly after I started high school. My parents had just moved us to a completely new town, and at first I didn't know a single person there. Those first few months were rough. I spent most of my time alone, trying to adjust to a place that didn't feel like home. Eventually, I got used to it. The reason we moved in the first place was because my parents were paranoid. A series of murders had happened in our old town, and they became convinced we needed to get as far away from it as possible. At the time, I thought it was a huge overreaction, moving across the country just because of that. But I didn't argue. I was just a kid. Alex and I became friends almost instantly. We bonded over the internet and everything connected to it. I was obsessed with online games and spent hours every night playing. Alex, on the other hand, was more into the technical side of things. He loved coding, building small programs, and exploring parts of the internet most people didn't even know existed. 2 years later, we were still best friends, but we were older and way more curious about things we probably shouldn't have been messing with. That's when Alex discovered the dark web. At first, it was just another interesting corner of the internet to explore, but before long, it became an obsession for him. He spent hours every day digging through strange sites, hidden forums, and encrypted pages, always searching for something new. Most of the time, it didn't seem like a big deal, but one search he made ended up being the worst mistake of his life. I remember the morning everything started very clearly. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating over and over again on my nightstand. At first, I thought it was just a couple of notifications, but when I picked it up and unlocked the screen, I saw dozens of text messages. All of them were from Alex. That alone was strange. Alex wasn't the type of person who constantly texted people. In fact, getting more than a single short message from him in a day was pretty rare. But this was different. Message after message filled the screen. "Dude, Jack, you need to come over right now. This is important. Please wake up. This is urgent. Where are you?" The messages kept repeating the same thing in slightly different ways, each one sounding more desperate than the last. It was obvious something was seriously wrong. My parents were already at work, so the house was empty. I threw on some clothes, grabbed my phone, and headed straight over to Alex's place. When I turned onto his street, I immediately knew something was off. There were police cars everywhere. 4 patrol cars were parked along the curb in front of Alex's house, their lights silently flashing. A crowd of people had gathered outside, including reporters with cameras and news vans parked along the road. My stomach dropped. I pushed my way through the small crowd until I reached the front yard. One of the officers stopped me, but before he could say anything, Alex's mom stepped out onto the porch. She looked like she had been crying for hours. When she saw me, she told the officer it was okay and waved me inside. As soon as I stepped through the door, I noticed tears running down her face. "What's going on, Mrs. Gonzalez?" I asked. Her voice shook as she answered. "Alex is missing." For a moment, I just stood there, completely stunned. Missing? That didn't make any sense. He had texted me just a few hours earlier, and that's when the realization hit me. Those messages. What if he wasn't just asking me to come over? What if he had been trying to warn me? I walked into the kitchen where several detectives were talking quietly among themselves. One of them noticed me standing there and approached. "Is Alex going to be okay?" I asked. The detective gave me a quick, rehearsed smile. "Of course he is. We're going to find him very soon." But something about the way he said it didn't feel right. It sounded like the kind of thing adults say when they're trying to comfort someone, even though they don't actually know the answer. Deep down, I had this terrible feeling that I might never see Alex again. Then I remembered the messages on my phone. I quickly pulled it out and showed them to the detective. "He texted me this morning," I said. "What if this has something to do with him disappearing?" The detective took the phone and started reading. As he scrolled through the messages, I watched his expression slowly change. It went from neutral to concerned, then to something much worse. After a moment, he looked back at me. "I'm going to need to keep your phone for now," he said. "We'll return it after we examine the messages." I nodded, still trying to process everything that was happening. For the next couple of hours, I stayed at the house. Part of it was because I missed Alex already, but another reason was that I wanted to help his parents however I could. They had always treated me like part of their family, and seeing them like this was heartbreaking. His mom barely stopped crying. Eventually, though, I went upstairs to Alex's room. I figured maybe I could find something, anything that might explain what had happened to him. As the video ended, it immediately switched to another clip. It showed the exact same room and the same chair I had just seen before. I already felt sick from what I had watched, and I knew I couldn't handle seeing any more of it. My parents were murderers. At that moment, I finally understood the real reason we had moved away 2 years earlier. Back then, I had always felt like something about the move didn't make sense. My parents had acted nervous and secretive, but I never pushed them about it. I just accepted the explanation they gave me. Now, I knew the truth, and the truth was far worse than anything I could have imagined. For a while, I just sat there staring at the screen, completely frozen. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. The people I trusted most in the world were capable of something so horrifying that I could barely process it. This whole time, I had believed Alex was accusing me of something. When I saw that he had searched my last name, I thought he might have believed I was somehow involved in the murders. I thought he was suspicious of me, but now I realized I had been completely wrong. Alex wasn't accusing me. He was trying to warn me. I started scrolling through more of the videos on the page. Every single one showed the same room, the same chair. Different victims, but the exact same setup. It looked like some kind of basement or hidden room. I didn't recognize it, but something about it felt disturbingly familiar. The more I looked, the worse it got. I couldn't believe how many videos there were, dozens of them, maybe even hundreds, each one showing another person who had been brought into that room. I was almost done scrolling through the page when I noticed something that made my stomach drop even further. At the very top of the page was a section labeled Newest Upload, and there was a video that had been uploaded today. For a second, I just stared at it, trying to convince myself not to click it. I already knew what I was going to see, but at the same time, I felt like I had to know. If this had something to do with Alex disappearing, then this video might explain everything. With my hand shaking on the mouse, I clicked on it. The video loaded slowly. When it finally started playing, the screen showed the same room again, the same chair, but this time there was a man tied to it instead of a woman. He had a sack over his head, so I couldn't see his face. My heart was beating faster and faster as I watched. Just like in the other videos, the victim struggled against the ropes, trying desperately to break free. A few seconds later, the door to the room opened, and just like before, my parents walked into the frame. My father was the first to approach the chair. My mother followed closely behind him. My dad slowly reached forward and grabbed the sack that was covering the man's head. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, he pulled the sack off. At first, I couldn't tell who it was, but then the camera focused on his face, and the moment I saw him clearly, my entire body went numb. It was Alex. I sat in my car for a few seconds without turning the engine on. The inside of the car suddenly felt colder, even though the heater was still running. My phone was lying on the passenger seat. I opened the Craigslist listing again, the photo of the van, the exact same one the seller had sent me earlier. I zoomed in on the image, and that's when I noticed something. There was a small white sticker on the back window of the van, square-shaped, barely noticeable. Slowly, I lifted my eyes. The van parked across the lot, the same sticker. My stomach dropped. It was the same van. I didn't wait any longer. I turned the key and pulled out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see the van still sitting there. But just as I reached the exit, its headlights suddenly turned on. I pulled onto the road and started driving. At first, everything seemed normal. But a couple minutes later, those same rectangular headlights appeared in my rearview mirror again, the van, following behind me. At first, it stayed at a distance, then it slowly got closer. I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence. Maybe the guy had simply left the parking lot at the same time. But when I turned onto another street, the van turned right behind me. That's when I knew. My palms started sweating against the steering wheel. My heart was beating way too fast. I made another turn, then another. The van stayed behind me. Sometimes it dropped back a little. Sometimes it got closer again, almost like the driver didn't want to make it too obvious he was following me. I grabbed my phone. My fingers were shaking. I was about to dial 911, but right then the van suddenly sped up. It pulled much closer. In the mirror, I could see the driver's silhouette and another figure sitting in the passenger seat, so there were at least two of them. The van suddenly switched lanes. For a moment, I thought it was about to pass me, but instead it pulled up right next to my car. Only for a few seconds, I instinctively turned my head, and that was my biggest mistake, because I saw the passenger. He was staring directly at me and smiling, not a normal smile, the kind of smile people make when they've already decided you belong to them. My stomach twisted. Then the van suddenly accelerated and drove ahead. Just like that, I was left alone on the road. For the next several minutes, I kept driving, expecting to see it again. But the van never came back. Eventually, I made it home. I shut off the engine and sat there for a second. That's when I realized my hands were still shaking. I went inside. The first thing I did was open Craigslist again. The van listing was gone. Completely. Like it had never existed. The next day I told a friend about what happened. He just shrugged, said it was probably a coincidence. But a couple weeks later, I saw something in a local Facebook group. A guy from a nearby town had gone missing. The last place his phone was tracked was a supermarket parking lot. He had gone there to meet someone selling a used van from Craigslist. I stared at the screen for a long time, because suddenly I realized something. That night, they weren't waiting for him. They were waiting for anyone, and they almost got me. Right now, my wife and I are completely shaken. This is the kind of situation you usually only see in movies or crime shows, but somehow it's happening to us in real life. Yesterday evening, a little after 6 o'clock, my wife and I were in the kitchen making dinner together. Everything felt completely normal. Out of nowhere, our son Kyle walked in through the back patio door. Kyle is 6 years old, almost 7. He was holding a folded piece of paper in his hand, and there was something strange about the look on his face. Now, normally this wouldn't have seemed weird at all. Kyle loves drawing. He's always writing little stories or doodling on random sheets of paper. It's one of his favorite things to do. But the odd part was that he had just come in from the backyard where he had been hitting a baseball off the tree with his plastic bat. There was absolutely no reason for him to suddenly be carrying around a piece of paper. Kyle is also the kind of kid who wears his emotions on his sleeve. You can always tell when something is bothering him. So when I asked him where he got the paper, I immediately noticed the nervous look on his face. It was that same expression he always makes when he thinks he might be in trouble. I asked him to let me see it. At first, he hesitated. He clearly didn't want to hand it over, but I insisted. After a moment, he slowly gave it to me. When I unfolded the page, this is what it said. Dear Kyle, I know this note might seem scary. Your daddy will probably think it is. But grown-ups don't really understand how friendships can grow when kids are just allowed to be kids. And what a kid you've become, Kyle. You're growing faster than a weed. Last night at T-ball, you hit the ball for 3 bases, and your team took a 2-run lead. Yes, I've been watching you for a while now, and it's true. I think we could become perfect friends. You're a kid through and through, and I am too. At least, sometimes. The problem is your parents. I'm not sure they would let us spend time together. One of them seems rude. The other seems very proper, church-going, pure, holy, devout. But I have an idea. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., you can come see me. The address is written below this letter. Please, pretty please, don't tell your dad. Your mom and dad just wouldn't understand. Come by yourself. I'll be dressed like an elf. And we can even hold hands. Would you like that? You will. You really will, Kyle. We're going to have so much fun together. I'll see you there, by the sycamore tree, where our 2 kindred souls can finally meet. At the bottom of the page there was an address written in messy handwriting. 3 orange circle. The moment I read it, my stomach dropped. I knew instantly this wasn't some childish prank. My wife Carrie is the youth group leader at our church, and Kyle had actually played a T-ball game the night before. And orange circle. It's only 1 street away from where we live. Even worse, I'm pretty sure that lot number 3 is the empty house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the one with the huge sycamore tree in the backyard. That realization made my blood run cold. Was this sick freak actually watching my son's baseball game? And what would have happened if I had never noticed the letter? I immediately called for my wife. Carrie, you need to come read this. When she saw it, she completely lost it. Her face turned pale and she grabbed the phone to call the police. While she was talking to them, I flipped the letter over. That's when I noticed something else written on the back. At first I couldn't read it. The words looked completely scrambled. Then I realized something. The entire message was written backwards, almost like it was meant to be read in a mirror. And when I finally held it up to the mirror, I wish I hadn't. While my wife was still on the phone with the police, I stood there in the kitchen staring at the back of the letter. At first, the writing didn't make any sense. The letters looked completely backwards, almost like someone had written them while looking into a mirror. Then it clicked. Whoever wrote this didn't want Kyle to be able to read it. My hands were already shaking a little as I walked over to the hallway mirror and held the paper up in front of it. The words slowly began to make sense, and as I started reading them, my stomach dropped. Now, just in case your dad is reading this, it's time I tell him a little story. If your mom opens her mouth or your dad tells a soul, I'm afraid things might get messy. On July 10th, 1995, a woman named Susie disappeared. Susie, you see, unlike you and me, wasn't very careful about who she had been kissing. I kept her around for a little while, but old things get boring eventually, and after some time, I had gotten my fill, so I threw her away. But much to my disappointment, the hunger inside me never went away. I tried to bury that hunger deep down, somewhere inside myself where nothing could escape. But lately, something strange has been happening. I keep seeing Kyle in my dreams, and that hunger, it's starting to come back again. Now that you know what I'm capable of, far more than either of you could ever understand, remember this. If one word is spoken to anyone, children get broken, and Susie will have a new friend. By the time I finished reading the message, my entire body felt cold. My wife was still talking to the police, her voice shaking. I couldn't even find the words to explain what I had just read. This wasn't some creep trying to lure a kid with candy. This person was claiming to have killed someone, and judging by the tone of the letter, he wasn't bluffing. The police arrived roughly 30 minutes later. By that time, my wife and I were both pacing around the living room, still trying to process what we had just read. When the officers stepped inside, we immediately handed them the letter. They stood there in the kitchen reading it carefully while my wife held Kyle close beside her. I could see the officers exchanging looks with each other as they finished reading. One of them finally folded the letter and handed it back. He told us that we needed to stay inside for the rest of the night and make sure every door and window in the house was locked. The man who wrote the letter had very likely been inside our backyard at some point. Just hearing that made my stomach turn. Our backyard was surrounded by a wooden fence. The thought that someone had climbed over it and stood out there watching my son made me feel physically sick. I kept blaming myself. Just a few months earlier, I had received a security camera for Christmas. I had never gotten around to installing it. Now I couldn't stop thinking about how badly I wished I had. Thankfully, nothing happened that night. No strange noises, no one outside the house, no new letters. But even so, none of us slept very much. The next morning, I received a phone call from a detective who had been assigned to the case. He told me that after reading the letter, they had started reviewing missing persons cases from 1995. At first, they didn't expect to find anything, but eventually something came up, and what he told me next made my chest tighten. There was a woman who disappeared on July 10th, 1995. Her name was Suzanne Carrington. The detective explained that Suzanne Carrington had disappeared on July 10th, 1995, exactly like the note described. According to the case files, the last person who saw her alive was a friend she had been meeting at a 24-hour gym they both went to. Her friend said Suzanne had mentioned she had recently met someone new. She told her she was going to do a quick workout before heading home to get ready for their second date, but Suzanne never made it back home. She was never seen again, and the man she had supposedly been seeing was never identified. When the detective told me that, my stomach dropped. But then he said something even worse. The address listed on Suzanne's records was 3 Orange Circle, the exact same address written at the bottom of the letter Kyle had brought inside. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. My mind kept going back to the backyard, the fence, and that sick poem written to my son. That meant whoever wrote the note either lived there before or somehow knew everything that had happened in that house. The detective told me they wanted to meet with me later that evening to go over everything again. They planned to check the empty house on Orange Circle and investigate the property more carefully. But right now, they wanted us to stay home and keep Kyle close. I hung up the phone and sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the letter again. My wife was standing by the window watching Kyle play quietly in the living room, completely unaware of what was happening around him. Neither of us said anything for a long time. Finally, she looked at me and asked the question we were both thinking. What do we do now? And honestly, I still don't know the answer. I still remember the first time it happened. Click. Click. Honey, did you hear that? I whispered, after suddenly waking up in the middle of the night. The strange noise had pulled me out of sleep so abruptly that my heart was already racing. What are you talking about? My wife Carmen muttered sleepily. Her voice sounded irritated, the way it does when someone gets woken up in the middle of the night for no reason. But by the time she said that, the sound had already stopped. The following night, it happened again. Click, click, the exact same noise. Quiet, but clear enough to wake me up. What could that even be? I asked, nudging my wife again and pointing toward the bedroom door. This time, Carmen heard it too. That sounds like the doorknob, she whispered, suddenly much more awake. We both got out of bed and slowly walked toward the door, but by the time we reached it, the noise had stopped once again. Thankfully, ever since I lived in the city years ago, I had gotten into the habit of locking my bedroom door every night before going to sleep. It was just something I always did, and even after moving into my wife's apartment years later, the habit never disappeared. Even now, in our quiet suburban home, I still locked the bedroom door every single night before bed. The night after that, nothing happened. We didn't hear the clicking sound at all. Maybe we were both sleeping too deeply to notice it, or maybe it simply didn't happen that night. Either way, we assumed the strange little incident was behind us, until the next night. Click, click. There it is again, Carmen whispered nervously. Is that what I think it is? It definitely is, I replied quietly, feeling a cold shiver run down my spine as the sound echoed through the hallway outside our bedroom. For the first time, the noise actually started to scare me. Slowly and carefully, I tiptoed over to the door. I didn't want whoever was outside to hear me moving. Then I grabbed the handle and suddenly pulled the door open. Standing there in the hallway was my 8-year-old daughter, just staring at me. "Christy?" I said, confused. "Yes, Dad?" she answered calmly. "What are you doing out here, sweetheart? You almost scared me to death." "I missed you and Mommy," she said quietly. I have to admit, it was so adorable that I almost forgot how creepy the noises had been the last few nights. "That's all," she added softly. Then she simply turned around and walked down the hallway. "Good night, Daddy." I climbed back into bed and let out a long breath of relief. So that was it. My daughter had been the one making the noise all along. But the next day, something about it started bothering me. The more I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. How many nights had this happened already? And if she really just missed us, why did she walk away so quickly after I opened the door? The next evening, I decided I wasn't going to open the door right away. Instead, when the sound started again, I slowly got out of bed and quietly walked across the room. Carmen stayed in bed, half asleep, barely reacting this time. I guess she thought it was just Christy again, but something about it didn't feel right to me anymore. Click, click. I pressed my ear against the door and listened carefully. I could hear the handle being twisted back and forth, like someone was trying to force it open. My daughter was clearly trying to turn the knob again, pulling on it like she had the previous nights. But this time, I didn't open the door. I just stood there in silence. The handle kept moving. Click, click, click. It went on for a few more seconds before finally stopping. Slow footsteps walked away from the door, back to the hallway, back to her room. I climbed back into bed, but sleep never came. My mind kept replaying the moment over and over again. Why would she be trying to open the door like that? And if she really just missed us? Why didn't she say anything? Why didn't she knock? Why was she trying to open it while we were asleep? That night I barely slept at all. I just stared at the ceiling, thinking about it again and again until morning. By the next evening, I had made up my mind. If she wanted the door open so badly, then tonight I was going to give her the chance. Before going to bed, I quietly unlocked the bedroom door. Carmen noticed. "Why'd you unlock it?" she asked. "So Christy doesn't have to keep messing with the handle," I said casually. She shrugged, too tired to question it. Later that night, after we turned off the lights, I pretended to fall asleep, but I didn't. Instead, I lay there in the dark, staring at my phone while the hours passed. I was trying my best not to drift off. Every few minutes I checked the time. Midnight passed, then 1 in the morning, then 2. Finally, sometime deep in the night, I heard a sound, but it wasn't the clicking anymore. This time, it was different. Instead of the knob rattling back and forth, I heard it turn, slowly, click. Then the long creaking sound of the bedroom door opening. Screech! The sound sent a chill straight through my body. I quickly turned off my phone and shut my eyes, leaving them barely open just enough to see through my lashes. And then, the door opened. I lay completely still, pretending to be asleep. Through my barely opened eyes, I could see the door slowly closing behind her. The hallway light slipped away as the door clicked shut. The room went dark again. My daughter stood there for a moment, just standing in the middle of the room, watching us. Even though I couldn't clearly see her face in the dark, I could feel it. That strange feeling that someone is staring directly at you. Then she started moving, slowly. Step by step, Christy walked across the room toward my wife's side of the bed. For a second, I tried to convince myself everything was normal. Maybe she really did miss her mom. Maybe she just wanted to crawl into bed with us like kids sometimes do after a bad dream. But something about the way she was walking felt wrong. Too quiet, too careful, too slow. My heart started beating harder with every step she took. When she finally reached Carmen's side of the bed, she stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I saw her move one of her hands behind her back. At first, I thought she was scratching herself or adjusting her pajamas, but then she pulled something out, something long, something metal. Even in the darkness, I could see the faint reflection of the blade. It was a knife, a kitchen knife. My entire body went cold. Christy slowly lifted it above her head. She held it there for a second, standing right next to my sleeping wife, and then she brought it down, fast, right toward Carmen. But before the blade could reach her, I lunged forward and grabbed it with my hand. The knife sliced straight into my palm. Pain exploded through my arm. "Ah!" I screamed as blood instantly started pouring from my hand. "Christy, what are you doing?" Carmen woke up immediately, startled by the scream. But Christy didn't answer. She didn't say a single word. Instead, she made a sound I will never forget. A low, angry hiss, like an animal. Before we could react, she yanked the knife free from my hand and ran out of the room. We heard her small footsteps racing down the hallway. Then, bang, her bedroom door slammed shut. Blood was dripping everywhere. Carmen grabbed towels while I tried to wrap my hand to stop the bleeding. Neither of us said much. We were both in shock, because the one thought running through both of our minds was the same. Why would our 8-year-old daughter try to kill her mother? For the rest of that night, we didn't dare open Christy's bedroom door, not after what had just happened. Carmen kept asking me over and over if I was sure about what I saw, but the knife wound in my hand was proof enough. I could still feel the blade tearing through my skin when I grabbed it. There was no misunderstanding what had happened. Our daughter had tried to stab my wife. Eventually, Carmen wrapped my hand as tightly as she could with towels and gauze, and then she drove me to the hospital. Neither of us said much during the drive. The silence in the car felt heavy. Every now and then, Carmen would glance at my hand, still bleeding through the bandages, and then quickly look back at the road. When we arrived, I told the doctors exactly what had happened. At first, they looked skeptical, but once they examined the wound, they could tell it was deep enough that it clearly came from a kitchen knife. After getting stitched up, I called the police and explained everything again. They said they would send someone to the house to check on Christy. But by the time Carmen and I finally returned home early that morning, something was wrong. The front door was wide open. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. We rushed inside and ran down the hallway to Christy's room. Her door was completely destroyed. The wood around the lock had been splintered like something had forced its way through it. But the room itself was empty. Her bed was untouched. The window was open. Christy was gone. The police searched the entire neighborhood that morning. They brought dogs, patrol cars, even helicopters, but they never found a single trace of her. No footprints, no sightings, nothing. Our daughter had simply vanished. That was years ago. And to this day, no one has ever seen Christy again. Sometimes I still lie awake at night thinking about that moment when she stood beside our bed holding that knife, about the sound she made when I stopped her, that horrible hiss. Even now, after all these years, I still lock my bedroom door every single night. And honestly, I hope everyone else does too.